You know, the older you get, you always assume that things that you enjoyed when you were younger were going to start going steeply downhill, driving off a cliff, so to speak. But Jesus Christ almighty, I did not expect it to happen as frequently and as violently and viscerally, if that's even a word, as it is right now. So today's video is a little bit different. I feel like I have to and want to talk about this, the whole Xbox situation, what's going on right now. So Xbox has not been in a good spot for a long time. I think we all know that.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
The era of the 360 was a very, very different era. It was almost like a completely different brand to what Xbox is now. Ever since the Xbox One reveal, they've kind of been on shaky tracks. But what happened as I posted this video yesterday or 2 days ago is just... It feels like the final straw. I've never seen this much negative sentiment and just, I don't know what the word, I can't even think of an adequate word to fit the amount of criticism and negativity surrounding Xbox right now because of what they've just done, and I feel like I need to talk about it. But before we do, we've got to go through a timeline of events that led us to this moment, because what happened the other day has been brewing for, what, 3-4 years now, so let's start there. So during the lockdown era, where everybody was at home, the stimulus checks were getting pumped out like crazy, people were playing a lot more games and they were also spending a lot more money on more games. So video gaming, tech in general, but gaming in particular, saw huge revenue increases. And so as a response, there was rampant, and I even remember saying at the time, very clearly irresponsible hiring going on. There was companies hiring tons of people for jobs that realistically weren't going to last forever because the economic boom was not going to last forever. But then the lockdowns end and the financial reckoning begins. Now, as Halo fans, we're familiar with layoffs. It's awful seeing so many people just lose their jobs, likely their dream jobs, just like that, because of what were realistically poor financial decisions by executives. But we're no stranger to this, and after lockdowns, they start happening in droves. Every industry got hit by them, but tech and gaming in particular seemed to get hit the hardest. So Xbox and by extension Microsoft's layoffs started in early 2023 when 10,000 people were laid off by Microsoft. And as we know, I think it was like 300 people were laid off by 343. It was roughly half of the entire studio were laid off, along with a bunch of other internal studios as well. But unfortunately, the layoffs at the start of 2023 kind of just felt like the spark that lit the flame, because they've been continuing throughout the gaming sector ever since, up until, well, now. They're still going on, and unfortunately Microsoft have been leading the charge with them. But there's something that predates most of this that we haven't talked about yet that's a pretty huge deal with all of this, and those are the acquisitions that Xbox did. So in 2021, they bought ZeniMax Bethesda for $7 billion, and then late last year, the deal was finalized for them to buy Activision Blizzard for $70 billion. And at one point, Phil Spencer was even trying to buy Valve and Nintendo. Acquisitions are obviously part of a business. They're the way that the business world operates. They're normal. But gaming, although it's highly corporatized nowadays, gaming's not a business. First and foremost, gaming is an art form. It's an extension of movies or TV shows or books or comics. It's an extension of the arts. And so when you start running it as solely a business, you lose so much of the flair that made it special. And very clearly, the balance between art and business is not being held here. The intent with all these acquisitions was to bolster the lineup on Game Pass, which since like 2016, 2017 has been Xbox's primary focus. They've almost shifted entirely to focus on Game Pass over even console sales. Console sales for Xbox are down horrific. And I mean, up until now, it kind of didn't really seem like they cared, but clearly it's having effects. And then in the process, they also sought to fix another one of their problems, which was Xbox's, at least in the last decade, very lackluster first-party lineup. Outside of Halo, which comes out every blue moon, Gears of War, and Forza, their first-party lineup was always really bad. So buying ZeniMax and Bethesda and having Fallout and Elder Scrolls and having, for example, Call of Duty become a first-party lineup was always part of the plan with these acquisitions. That brings us to earlier this year. So in January, earlier this year, not even 3 months after buying Activision Blizzard, Microsoft lay off 1,900 of their 22,000 staff, and that even causes the CEO of Blizzard, Mike Ibarra, who actually used to work at Xbox, to step down. And that leads us to the events of this video. So Not even 4 months after laying off 10% of the newly acquired Activision Blizzard, Xbox are now shutting down 4 entire Bethesda studios: Arkane Austin, Tango Gameworks, AlphaDog Games, and Roundhouse Studio. But you want to know what the absolute rotting cherry is on this, like, putrid cake? It infuriates me even saying this. So, when these layoffs were announced internally at Xbox, Matt Booty, who is the... Hang on, let me just check what he actually is. Head of Xbox Game Studios. He's the head of Xbox Game Studios, right? Bear that in mind. So he sent us an email around to all the other Xbox studios announcing the studios that are shutting down and the layoffs. And the guy gets 2 of the studios that he bought for $7 billion and that he's now shutting. He gets their names wrong. I don't even know what to say. He calls AlphaDog Games AlphaDog Studios and Roundhouse Studio Roundhouse Games. I mean, that kind of says all you need to know, right? That kind of says all you need to know about higher-ups and executives not having a clue what they're doing and the lives they're playing with. At the end of the day, these studios were populated by potentially hundreds of people that are now without work. And this guy, this asshole, can't even get their names right. He can't even get their names right. Matt Booty then went on to say that they're making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of their portfolio and focus on their priority games. Which, call me a cynic, you may call me a cynic. Nowadays, being a cynic often means being a realist, but call me a cynic, that to me sounds like they're cannibalizing their own studios to focus on more live service slop, to be honest with you. So, 2 of the studios that got shut down in particular really hurt. So the first one was Arkane Austin, right? So Arkane Austin were the ones behind Redfall, which, as we know, not a good game, did not launch well, did not do well. By all accounts, that game failed, right? Flopped hard. The more you look into it, the more you realize that that was primarily due to higher-ups and executives intervening and making Arkane Austin, who are known for making some of the absolute best single-player immersive sims in the entire industry. Prey 2017, their game is one of my favorite games of all time. It's one of the best video games ever made, right? Arkane Austin were responsible for that. But higher-ups intervened and made them make some co-op multiplayer live service slop, and that's how we got Redfall. Redfall really was just a blip in the otherwise flawless track record of Arkane Austin. I mean, they did Prey, they did Dishonored. Apparently a new Dishonored game was in the works. We're never getting any of that now because the studio now doesn't exist. And then the head, I believe it was the studio head or director of Arkane Leon, who were the other Arkane studio, who thankfully weren't shut down, took to Twitter, and the guy had some pretty scathing words for Xbox executives. This is absolutely terrible. Permission to be human. To any executive reading this, friendly reminder that video games are an entertainment and cultural industry, and your business as a corporation is to take care of your artists and entertainers and help them create value for you. Don't throw us into gold fever gambits. Don't use us as straw men for miscalculations and blind spots. Don't make our work environments Darwinist jungles. You say that we make you proud when we make a good game. Make us proud when times are tough. We know you can. We've seen it before. Man, I really hope the Xbox executives that are responsible for all of these layoffs and studio shutterings read that and had a good think about it, because, I mean, the guy's bang on. But honestly, an equally, if not possibly even more baffling shutdown is Tango Gameworks. Now, a little bit of backstory. So for years now, Xbox have been trying to get some kind of foothold in the Japanese market. Of course, Nintendo and Sony absolutely dominate Japan, and Xbox has been trying to get into it for a while. Enter Tango Gameworks. So Tango was started by one of my all-time video game heroes, Shinji Mikami, one of the godfathers behind Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and 4, and also one of the geniuses behind Evil Within as well, which he actually made at Tango Gameworks. But more recently, they released a game called Hi-Fi Rush. Now, Hi-Fi Rush was a really quirky, Japanese-styled game that was shadow-dropped kind of weirdly and suddenly last year and released to huge, and I mean gigantic, critical acclaim. And even according to the Vice President of Xbox Games Marketing, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. This was the splash that Xbox had been trying to make in Japan for God knows how long. They'd finally done it. Hi-Fi Rush was a huge success despite being shadow dropped. Phil Spencer even went to Tango last year in October, I believe, so only a few months ago, to see what they were working on. All the pictures had everyone smiling. Reportedly, they were working on Hi-Fi Rush 2, which clearly Phil would have seen because he would have been there, and Hi-Fi Rush was even nominated for 5 awards at the Game Awards and even won Best Audio Design, right? This game was like everything every Xbox executive had gotten at the side of his bed and prayed for like 10 years. They'd done what they needed to do. And now, Tango Gameworks, for some baffling reason, have been shut down and Hi-Fi Rush 2 has been cancelled. And then, you want to know what the absolute kicker is, right? So, Hi-Fi Rush wasn't a huge game. It wasn't the size of, like, I don't know, like a Fallout game or like a Halo game. It was a smaller game. It was still very well received, did very well, but it was a smaller game, right? It wasn't a huge, like, blockbuster release. Literally 24 hours after they announced that Tango are being shut down, Matt Booty says in an internal Xbox town hall that we need smaller games that give us prestige and awards. Matthew, sir, that's exactly what Hi-Fi Rush was, and you just killed the studio that made it. This guy, man, this guy. You know, the most painful thing about all of this is that Microsoft apparently don't have the money to keep these studios afloat. They don't have enough resources to keep them going. They need to do extremely harsh cutbacks into the whole like lineup of Xbox game studios. But at the same time, rather interesting this, they were somehow able to come up with, how much was it? $375 million to give to fucking Bobby Kotick, of all people, when they bought Activision out. They had the money for that, and they didn't. I know there's legality in there, there's legal reasons why that had to be done, but like, it just kind of shows you everything that's wrong with the way that the game industry operates right now. Now that it's completely dominated by corporate and business, and it doesn't seem like it's kind of like, at least a period is in the early 2000s, it seemed like it was like half and half art and business, whereas now it's just like business all the way up there and the art's down there, maybe if they can be bothered to throw money at it. If not, then screw it, just throw in an item shop and that'll be the art in the game. And you know, reading all of this, I can't help but think Game Pass has a hand to play in this. Since like forever, they've been touting Game Pass as the best deal in gaming, and I mean, it is the best deal in gaming. $10 or whatever a month to gain like day one free access to a litany of basically every single first party AAA release and AA and everything below, and also a ton of other AAA games that release as well. $10 for infinite free access to all of that. Just the business lines in my head aren't lining up. And hell, there's a guy called Brad Hildebrand, who's a long-term Xbox and EA employee, who made a long statement on LinkedIn that literally supported this. He said that the main problems basically boil down to the Activision acquisition and Game Pass. So prior to Activision, the Xbox division of Microsoft was such a small portion of the overall company that it didn't really matter if it made a small loss or a small gain each year. This meant that some not so financially viable plays, like for example Game Pass, fit into their business model, especially when Game Pass's growth was as explosive as it was in the early years. But then, Xbox decided to ask Daddy Microsoft for $70 billion to buy Activision Blizzard, and then that $70 billion that they borrowed, they now, of course, have to find a way to pay back because, I mean, it's $70 billion. It's not just couch change. Even for Microsoft, that's a lot of money. Microsoft are like a, $1 trillion company? That's 7% of their overall company. That is a large amount of money for even a company of that size. You couple having to recuperate $70 billion with the fact that Game Pass growth has now massively stagnated, likely because it's hit peak saturation, and all of a sudden, hemorrhaging money every fiscal year starts to become a major problem. And the worst part about all of this is that it's not even the end of it. There are sources within Xbox saying that this is just the beginning of layoffs and cutbacks. There are more on the way. I mean, there are even some rumors now, again, from sources within Xbox, saying that the next target of cutbacks are going to be core Xbox game studios again. I think Chris Reagan really put it best in this tweet. Xbox is a schizophrenic brand these days, absolutely incoherent and bafflingly inept, with a borderline religious dedication to ensuring their own failures. Their skill at shooting themselves in the foot is unparalleled, unrecognisable from the 360 era. Sad but unsurprising. And you know, he's right, the way they operate does just seem like so directionless and erratic. One minute, they're touting Xbox Game Pass as a huge success and the best thing ever. Then they start acquiring a bunch of major publishers to bolster the Game Pass and first-party lineup. But then they start laying off a load of staff and shutting down a bunch of studios within those publishers that they hired to make them more games. And then they're like, maybe some of these games, like, I don't know, Call of Duty, for example, that we spent a lot of money buying, maybe we won't put them on Game Pass. And then they're also talking about putting their own first-party lineups on entirely other platforms as well. It just feels like they're fueled by knee-jerk reactions that make sense in the moment but don't have any long-term thought or planning put into them. The bottom line is that these rampant layoffs are just, I honestly don't think they're sustainable, right? Because you look at the case of Xbox in particular, one of the reasons, besides Game Pass, that they did all of these acquisitions was because they needed to bolster their first-party lineup, right? But now they're laying off so many of the studios that were in the process of making new games for their first-party lineup, so in a few years' time, when those games should have released, there's going to be a massive gap in the release schedule, which, again, is going to exacerbate the problem that caused these layoffs in the first place. It feels like a violent spiral to the bottom that doesn't have any kind of break or stop put into it. And next month, it's the Xbox Game Showcase. You know those showcases where Phil Spencer walks out on stage, wears one of the dev team's t-shirts, and starts by saying, "At Xbox, we love games, we appreciate games," after laying off thousands of people and shutting loads of studios and not putting any long-term planning into any of our decisions, right? Yeah, that showcase. How the hell are they going to get out on a stage in front of a live audience, in front of millions of people online, and start talking about new games? I truly don't get it. I mean, Hellblade 2 is coming out this month, and for like every game showcase the past few years, they've always shown that, and it seemed like they were really like putting a lot of effort into marketing that game. And then it comes time for them to do the final marketing push, and there's nothing. All that happens is Xbox tweet a picture because everyone was asking where the hell Hellblade marketing is, right? This is what I mean. Erratic and no long-term planning. None of it makes any sense. Honestly, right now, trust and faith in Xbox as a brand, and don't mistake me for like a super console fanboy or anything like that. Like, I've been gaming on PC now for 11 years. I've barely been an Xbox player for that long. I've played Xbox since the OG Xbox came out. I'd never had a PlayStation until 2018, honestly. But I've been PC since, but I still love Xbox as a brand because Halo, right? And like, it's the first major console that I played, but trust in it has never been this low. Right now, it genuinely feels so much lower than even when Don Matrick pulled their like, "Ooh, we have a console for you. It's called the Xbox 360 thing." That thing. Even worse than that somehow. Somehow that wasn't the bottom. They've let the first-party games that literally built their brand just fester and rot under garbage management and awful direction, and now the new studios and publishers they're buying to create new first-party games to fill in for the gaps left by those old IPs that should be carrying the brand still, like God of War does for PlayStation, like Mario does for Nintendo, right? Halo should absolutely still be doing that, so should Gears of War, but they're not. To fill in the gap that's left by those, they're still shuttering studios. I don't get it, man. Like, Phil Spencer, Matt Booty, and the other executives that were involved in this, I honestly don't know how you can just go through your day-to-day after letting 1,900 people in January, and then God knows how many more people, literally 4, if not 5 digits worth of people, go home without a job. I know it's part of business, I get that, I understand that, but these are the same people that will have okayed the rampant hiring sprees, the irresponsible hiring sprees during the lockdowns, right? I don't get it, man. I don't understand the way these executives operate. This just is the amalgamation of like everything that people have complained about with gaming now for the last 10 or so years, with everything becoming far too corporate, far too business focused, and the art kind of goes by the wayside with a lot of major games. It's just, it's tiring, man. It really is tiring. I don't know. I just felt like I had to make this video because Xbox, obviously, to all of us, even someone like me that has just played on PC for like 11 years, even people like me, Xbox does genuinely mean a lot. And seeing this happen is just depressing, because having gone through the OG Xbox era, having gone through the golden era of the 360, which seriously, if you didn't get to experience that, A, I am very sorry that you didn't get to, and B, it just seems like a different brand. Like, it genuinely seems like a completely different brand and corporation that was behind that, because, man. Anyway, yeah, I'll round this video out here. Bit of a long form, lightly edited rant, but I felt like I had to make it, like I said. So, yeah, wishing all the people that got laid off at Xbox and the studios and the subsidiaries all the best luck in the world. Like, this, none of this should have gone down the way it did at all. It's just awful management from the top, and I truly hope that everyone that got laid off finds their feet somewhere else, because you deserve to. Going through this is just, it shouldn't be happening. I'm sorry, an industry that is as profitable and as large as gaming should not have to do this. It shouldn't have to. But yeah, I'll catch you on the next one.